I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome to another episode of Ohio Politics Explained. We're recording on January 22nd, the same day Vice President JD Vance returned to Ohio to lay some groundwork for the 2026 election. We'll discuss his visit, a drop in healthcare enrollment, and legislation to ban 17-year-olds from getting married. Joining me today is Anthony Shoemaker.
Hi, Haley.
Real quick before we get started, if you find OPE enjoyable, useful, interesting, please consider leaving us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts. So Vance stopped at a rail facility in Toledo to tout the economy. He talked about a new law that got rid of taxes on tips and overtime, and the Trump administration's efforts to keep businesses in America. Ongoing issues with inflation, he argued, are Joe Biden's fault.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are on the cusp of the greatest economic year in the history of the United States of America because we're doing something new for a change. We're investing in you. We're investing in American workers. We're investing in American businesses, and we're saying to everybody that the United States is open for business, but only if you invest in our great American people and our great American businesses.
The politics of this event were pretty obvious.
Yeah, and, he talked about the great American comeback. He used that phrase. I think what we're seeing is, both sides are going to be running on the economy. They're going to be running on pocketbook issues, because that's, still where voters are focused. And there's no place more central to Ohio politics this year than Toledo.
Right. The location of this event was very intentional. Toledo is in the 9th Congressional District, which is currently represented by Democrat Marcy Kaptur. She's the longest serving woman in Congress, and Republicans are once again trying to get her out of office. Republicans in Ohio, when they redrew our congressional maps last year, they made that district much harder for Kaptur. It's a lot more favorable to Republicans now, but the GOP primary in that race is shaping up to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Marcy Kaptur, is probably the luckiest Democrat in Ohio recently. Like she's able to win, even in a district that's, it's been pretty red for a while now. It's even redder. In 2024, she was able to win even with Donald Trump on the ballot, but it was one of her closer races. I think she won by about 2,300 votes.
Yeah, and now, we're not entirely sure yet who her Republican opponent is going to be. There's a lawmaker in that race, a former lawmaker, and as of last week, a former ICE official who is originally from Northwest Ohio, but has not lived in that area recently. She worked for the state of Louisiana and then, of course, was in D.C. working for ICE. So it's hard to say at this point who has the edge in that primary. I have no predictions.
Yeah, that is a tough one to predict. And Madison Sheehan, the former ICE director, is also, I want to say, around 28 years old, 29, something like that. So she's a very young candidate. And then you also have Derek Marin, who ran against Marcy Kaptur before, and Josh Williams. And you also have a libertarian candidate in the race. And in a tight race like that, libertarians can have an impact. I think the Libertarian in 2024 got around 15,000 votes in that race.
And it's worth noting too, Vance today, while he talked a lot about how Kaptur needs to go, he did not plug any of the Republicans running in this primary. There's not a clear favorite at this point. It remains to be seen whether Vance, Trump, anyone else with a lot of sway will weigh in on this race as it gets closer. I think Trump especially likes to endorse winners, and right now we don't really know who the favorite is.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to endorse a candidate and then them lose. I would not be surprised if this is the first of many visits for Vance to Toledo, and President Trump could easily swing through that area. The people in Toledo are going to be inundated with ads this year from the Senate race, the governor race, and the congressional race.
And speaking of those races, the Republican candidates were at the events with Vance today. Vivek Ramaswamy, his running mate, Senate President Rob McCauley, and then Senator John Husted were all there. You know, they all got shout outs from Vance, underscoring the importance of those races as well. Especially, you know, I think for Husted, this used to be Vance's Senate seat, so he probably wants to make sure it stays in Republican hands and doesn't get reclaimed by former Senator Sherrod Brown.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, Senator Brown lost in 2024 to Bernie Moreno by about 3.5, 4 points or something like that. But President Trump was on the ballot, so that, you know, that can have a impact on turnout this year.
Happy election year, everyone.
Got off to an early start, didn't it?
Our next topic is healthcare. The number of Ohioans who signed up for healthcare under the Affordable Care Act dropped 20% this year. That means 120,000 fewer people than 2025. Experts say enrollment could decrease even further once people get their bills and realize they can't afford their premiums. What is driving this? Remind us.
About what was it? About 400,000 people, I think you said in your story, signed up for coverage this year, down about 120,000 from last year. And, you know, one of the things that really jumped out was, you know, Ohio was near the very bottom. Only North Carolina was, I believe, lower. And, you know, the healthcare costs, I think, other than the economy, are going to be front and center in the election because it's a pocketbook issue. The House and Senate let the enhanced credits expire after the government shutdown. So it was a big issue. You know, Democrats held that up for, I can't remember how long that shutdown lasted. But, you know, that was a key sticking point for them. Some Republicans wanted a extension for a couple of years, but other Republicans want to overhaul the entire system. Probably next to the economy, healthcare is going to be a major issue because people are going to feel it in their pocketbooks.
Yeah, there's some research by KFF, a healthcare policy nonprofit. They have this calculator where you can put in, you know, your income, family size, that kind of thing. And for example, if you're a single adult in Franklin County, you earn $50,000 a year, you could be paying $1,700 more in healthcare this year because these premiums are going up because the subsidies, or at least the enhanced subsidies, are no longer there. And, you know, the impact varies by location and family size and income and things like that. But there are a lot of people who are going to be feeling this, to your point. And, you know, certainly we're seeing it become a big issue in a lot of races, but at least in Ohio, you know, the U.S. Senate race between Husted and Brown is making this really a central part of his campaign at this point.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing, you know, and it's kind of a spinoff from the election that we had recently in New York City for mayor, where, you know, affordability issues are going to be front and center for Democrats trying to win back control of the House and Senate this year. You know, it's kind of a snowball effect. You know, you've got the economy, you've got healthcare costs, you've got property taxes, you've got the cost of living, all that sort of stuff. And I think Brown, you know, thinks that's a winning argument that he's got.
And it's similar to how he's run his campaigns in the past. I mean, he's always been big on sort of these working class pocketbook issues. Unlike other Democrats, he doesn't necessarily get super focused on social issues, things like that. So, you know, I think we're going to continue to hear a lot about that. Husted, for his part, has introduced legislation to extend the subsidies for 2 years, but he also wants to pair that with some things to combat fraud. For instance, the bill would require people to make a minimum $5 a month payment to kind of, the thinking, I think, is like, if you have to pay, then you're not going to be enrolling fraudulently because it's not free anymore. I'm not sure if that bill or ideas in that bill will make it to the finish line, but that is something that he's putting out there to say, you know, this is the work that I'm doing on this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Republicans went after Joe Biden and the Democrats about the cost of everything, and Trump talked about how prices were going to go down as soon as he took office. But now, it's the Republicans who are on defense when it comes to these issues. And, you mentioned earlier about Vance's visit to Toledo talking about the economy. And that's going to be the thing. The Republicans are now kind of in the position Democrats were in the last election.
We will wrap up today on the topic of marriage. A new bipartisan bill would raise the legal age of marriage in Ohio to 18. Right now, 17-year-olds can get married under certain circumstances, which is not as bad as the law used to be, but still not great.
Yeah, I mean, right now, 17-year-olds in Ohio can get married, but not long ago, just in 2019, Ohio changed its marriage laws to block young teens who were getting married. Thousands of them in the last 15 years. Girls as young as 14. There were cases where like 14-year-olds were getting married to men who were almost 50. And it's kind of shocking how common that was. And it's one of those things you would think a state like Ohio would have dealt with a long time ago. But it's only been in the last 6 or 7 years that they've tackled that issue.
Well, and when they changed the law in 2019, they did allow this current carve out for 17-year-olds, which is like if you can prove you've had adequate marriage counseling and a couple other things. Basically, if you can convince the judge, then 17-year-olds are allowed to be married. But I'm kind of surprised they didn't just make it 18 when this issue came up several years ago. Yeah,
and it has bipartisan support. I mean, I think it's pretty hard to argue against. It's going to be interesting to see if the vote is unanimous on this one, because if you're a lawmaker who supports 17-year-olds getting married, it might be a little awkward.
A little. And one more thing before you go. Advocates who want to block a new marijuana and hemp law had to resubmit their referendum petition this week. Attorney General Dave Yost found problems with the first attempt. We'll see if they get the green light this time. For now, the law is slated to take effect in March.